Now, it's a good opportunity whilst I'm here, because people often say, how did the show start? And how do you prepare to be a horse? And normally I don't have time to go through everything, but I think we've got a bit of time today. So let's start at the very beginning. There's a gentleman called Tom Morris, who I think you saw on the screen, who in 2004 knew that he wanted to do a collaboration with a puppet company from South Africa called Handspring, who you also saw on the screen, Basil and Adrian. Now, Handspring started out as art graduates in the 1970s, and they decided to take theatre to schools, educational theatre to schools, telling theatre with puppets that Adrian would create. Now, Adrian's mother was a puppeteer, and his father was a boat maker, so I think you'll be curious to see when we've got the bigger horses and the bigger puppets, he's combined both of those skills together. Now, they always used large animals in the shows. So you'd have, in this instance, we've got dogs, but sometimes they would have a rhino, or a crocodile, or a hyena. And in this picture, you see the hyena playing drafts with Helen of Troy, as you do. There's Adrian, and there's Basil. And the great thing about this hyena is Adrian describes it as one of the evolutionary leaps when it came to designing the legs for the horses. Because the leg had to curl and extend in order to grab hold of the draft piece and then pull it in to play the game of drafts. So you'll see this, there's a similarity with the horses when we later move on to this. And in this photo, I don't know if you can see, but there are actually two people inside the giraffe. And the person on the front legs is standing on stilts and controlling the head. And the back is kind of in control of the tail, but following what the front legs are doing. Now, obviously that's very difficult to control the neck and stand and not fall over at the same time. But there's a similarity with what you can see with the horse later on, is that the body is made of this cane. Now, the cane is, first of all, it's soaked in water, so it becomes malleable, and it can be bent into position. And then they sort of bind it with a rope or string, and once it dries, it retains that tensile strength. And it's good because it's light, comparably light. Puppeteers might not agree with me, but it's light enough to be able to walk around with this big animal. Now, here's the first model for what we were going to do with the show in Warhorse. And you can see that the people are inside the horse with the frame supported on their shoulders, and then the legs are hanging underneath it. Now, the first challenge for Adrian was they'd been used to creating these big animals, but they'd never had an animal that was supported, that could support a rider on top of them. So they'd never had to have a human on top. And so they thought, right, well, how are we going to do this? And what sort of substances are we going to create to hold the weight of a human being on top? So in actual fact, our horse is made of aluminium and cane and stretched georgette. And here, they're just using a very simple ladder with two aluminium frames supported by harnesses. And this is their next door neighbor. And here, you have the prototype puppet. I love this because it's actually taken just a few hours before the shipping company were about to arrive. And they hadn't had an opportunity to try out the puppet. So they thought, right, what are we going to do? We need to show some evidence to the producers at the National Theatre that we have a fully functioning puppet. So they thought, right, well, if we take various photos in galloping positions, then we might be able to convince them that we have a functioning puppet, which is exactly what they did. And here we have the first prototype horse. So this is several months later, a few months, probably 6 or 8 months later, this big box arrived at the National Theatre in the studio. And we took the puppet out and we assembled it all together. And that's me in the front legs, in the heart position. And we had no idea whether this was going to work. Could this puppet breathe? Could it walk? Could it act like a horse? Is this show going to work where the central character is an animal that doesn't speak? An animal which is, in fact, just a horse?